This is a tutorial on how to make a vector drawing of a human face using Omber. Omber is a new type of vector drawing program specializing in advanced gradients, which is especially useful for the type of soft shading you'll see in pictures of the human face. I'm starting with this public domain painting I found online. It's going to serve as a base that we can trace and build vector shapes on top of. First, I want to set up my workspace a bit. I actually want a few copies of this image. I'll put one image over here on the right to serve as a reference image. Then I'll make a copy of it using the Duplicate button. One problem you encounter when you try to recreate the subtle shading and gradients of the face is that it's hard to see where the different color regions are. In order to make it easier, I'm going to use one of the super tools in Omber called the Image Palette Reducer. This will reduce the number of colors in the image, making it easier to see where the regions of color are. It's never really too clear how many colors to set it to. You want a small number of colors to make it easier to work with the image, but you still need enough colors to capture its shadows and highlights. I'm going to set it to 96 colors. You can see that it reduces the number of colors in the image so that we only have a few blocks of solid colors. This makes it easy to see exactly where it's light and where it's dark. In the original image, it's not clear whether this color over here is actually lighter or darker than this color here. You can get weird optical illusion effects. But with the reduced image, it's clear that yes, this color here is the same as the color here. I'm going to make one more duplicate of the image, but I'm going to leave it in the exact same place as the other one. This is useful because you can then have one copy of the image below the drawing you're making and another one above it. To make it easier to find where everything is, I'm opening the object list view so that I can label everything. This image will be the reference image. I'll label this one the back image. And this one will be the overlay image. I don't need the overlay image at the moment, so I'll just hide it for now. Now I'm ready to draw. I'm going to start by drawing the general shape of the face with a base color. This isn't strictly necessary. You can start working on the detailed shading right away, but I like doing it and it's quick to do. In order to choose a base color for this shape, I'll just use the eyedropper tool to pick one of the colors from the face. I'll then switch to curve mode and start tracing out the outline of the face. As I mark out points on the outline, I'll go back and adjust the curve so that it fits the outline more closely. Since the forehead is covered by the hair, it doesn't matter how accurate the shape of the outline is up there. Now that I have a general shape for the face, there is one more adjustment that I want to do to my workspace. I'm going to move the overlay image so that it's in front of the drawing. Then I'm going to increase the transparency of the overlay image to 50%. This allows us to see the drawing underneath. This is useful for tracing the image because we can see our drawing and the overlay image at the same time. It's similar to the idea of onion skinning used in animation. I want to do one more thing though, which is to put the drawing that I'm making into its own group. Then I'm going to enter that group. When I'm inside the group, I can still see the overlay image, but I can't select or modify it. That means I can work on the drawing without accidentally selecting or modifying things from the overlay image or the back image. So now back to the drawing. Now that I have the general face shape, what I want to do is to make cutouts for the eyes. I'm going to divide this shape into two by selecting points from either side and then splitting the shape between those 2 points. I'm adding some points at the corners of the eyes where the eye holes should start and end. The two shapes that make the face are welded together, so to make the holes, I need to unweld the line where the eyes are. Once they are unwelded, I can convert the line into a curve and then reshape it to follow the outline of the eye. Oh, I forgot one thing. I'm going to make another duplicate of the reference image that I'm going to stick in the upper right for use later. Now back to the face shape. I'm going to expand the face shape under the hair so that it more accurately follows the shape of the human head. You won't actually see it in the final image because the hair will eventually cover it, but it makes it easier for me to visualize how the final head would look. And now we have our final base face shape. Since we have the general head shape and eyes worked in, let's roughen the mouth. It's hard to see the outline of the mouth in the blocky image, so I'm going to trace the mouth from the original reference image. I'm just going to block in the general shape first. First, the upper lip. I want the lower lip to be joined with the upper lip, so when I draw the lower lip, I'm going to use the Follow Segments mode to make sure they're attached. Then, I'm going to go back to Curve mode to draw the bottom part of the lower lip. To get the colors for the lips, I'm going to move it up to the image with the reduced palette. I want the center of the mouth to be darker, so I'll select the points from the center of the mouth and then use the eyedropper to grab the colors from there. I'll grab some colors for the other points too. If you look at the lower lip, you'll see that it's dark around the bottom, but it's lighter in the middle. In order to get that effect, I need an extra line down the middle so that I can assign some colors to the middle. To do that, I'm going to split the lower lip down the middle. I want an extra point for the middle color. And I'll assign some colors to the right half of the lower lip. And I'll assign the same coloring to the left half. It still doesn't look quite right. I want this lighter color to push through right across the lip. I'm going to split it again, so we get this lighter color going all the way across. I'm going to group these shapes and label them as lips. Then, I'll move them back to our face. So next, why don't we make some shading around the eyes and around the face? This is where we'll really see Omber's advanced gradients in action. Let's look at the reduced palette image of the face. In a traditional vector drawing tool, you would normally trace the outlines of the different regions of solid colors. So you would make one shape for the red region, and this area is a lighter pink, so you would trace along the edge of the pink area with another shape. You would then have solid blocks of color showing all the different shades of color in the face. Since Omber works with gradients and not solid colors, the process is a little different. Instead of tracing along the edges between different colors, you actually trace along the middle of a region of color. And since Omber automatically blends colors across its surface, you don't need to trace every shade of color, but just the major transitions. I'll show how it works with this cheek coloring. Instead of making a shape that surrounds the pink area, I'll just trace through the middle of the pink area for now. I'll use straight lines because it allows me to work faster initially, and you often can't see the difference once you get to the fine detail stage. In any case, I can always change things to curves later. So I've started in the middle of the pink area, and I'll extend the area to the middle of this color area over here. I'll now use the eyedropper to grab some colors for the points. You'll notice that I skipped over several color areas. Usually that's fine, but in this case, the color gradient across the surface of the shape doesn't match that of the original image. I'm going to add some extra points where the color is off, and then I'll assign colors to match the underlying image. That should make the gradient match the original shading a little better. I want to extend the gradient to the right to cover more of the face. I'll switch to follow segments mode so that the next shape will be welded and joined to the first shape I drew. Then I'll use the straight line mode to complete the rest of the shape. Here, I want the color from the first shape I drew to smoothly blend into the second shape. I'll select these points on the first shape, and I'll use the Copy to Welds button to copy the colors across to the second shape. Then for the other points, I'll assign them this shadow color from the face. The two shapes I've drawn so far may look a little off still. That's fine. I just want to get the rough coloring of the face to start with, and I'll go back in later to fine-tune things and fix it up. So now I'll move on to the bottom of the face. I'll actually turn on the Weld to Points option so that when I'm drawing lines, Omber will try to join shapes together. Omber will do this even when I'm not in Follow Segments mode. Since my new shape is welded to my other shapes, I can again use the Copy to Welds command to copy colors from my existing shapes to my new shapes. Here's a neat trick. I want to assign colors to these bottom points, but the shape is blocking the image underneath, so I don't know which colors to use. I first select the shape, then while it's still selected, I will hide it using the Object List view. I can select points and use the eyedropper to grab colors directly from the image underneath, setting the colors for those points. When I unhide the shape, it will have all the colors that I assigned to the points. So let's work on the chin area. I'll use follow segments to match the shape that I've already drawn. Then I'll go across through the middle of the color areas of the chin. I'll copy colors from my old shapes. And I'll grab colors for the new points along the outer edge of the new shape. This dark point here doesn't seem quite right. Let me check. Yes, it's the wrong color. I'll use the eyedropper to get the correct color, and I'll hold down the Shift button when I click. This will make the color be assigned to both shapes on either side of the point. So again, things will be a little chunky initially, but I just want to block in the general colors, and I'll clean things up afterwards. Here, there's some more subtle shading around the lips, but I'm going to ignore that for now. I'll try to recreate that shading later as an overlay layer with the mouth. I'm going to do a similar thing with the nose. I'll just make a shape showing the general color of the area, but I'll create an actual nose later. As I get close to finishing the shading on the lower half of the face, I'll try organizing things a bit better. I'll move it over to the full drawing. Next, I want the rough outline of these shaded shapes to match the outline of the head that I drew earlier. The points on the shaded shapes don't line up with the points on the outline, so I may have to create some new points. I'll use the weld command to weld together one point from the shaded shapes to a point on the outline. Once I have one common welded point between these two shapes, I can use the weld tool to weld the whole line segment too. I just have to select the line segment, choose the weld command, and then choose the line segment of the outline that I want to weld to. I'll continue this the rest of the way around the face. As I weld shapes together, you'll see that the shaded shapes will snap to match the shape of the head outline I drew earlier. Now I'll just finish up the shading on the lower part of the face. With the lower half of the face done, I'm grouping these shapes I used for shading and labeling them. I'll now move on to working on the shading of the upper half of the face. I'm making a single round shape for this eye socket. The colors for this eye socket didn't come out quite right. This red color from the lower half of the eye seems to be blending across the upper half of the eye, even though there's very little red there in the original image. The problem is that the red color in the corner is blended across the whole upper eyelid. I'll need to create a new point on the eyelid and assign it a different color. This way, the red color from the corner will stop at the point and not continue spreading further. I'll now continue on with the rest of the upper region of the face. The coloring here seems a little odd. It seems like the problem is just that the shape here is very thin, so the color transition looks like a line instead of being smoothed out over a larger area. I'll just make the shape there bigger in order to make the color gradient less abrupt. I want this line to connect to the outline of the head, so I'm just feeling out for points along the outline. If I'm near a point on the outline, my cursor should just snap to it, but I'm not finding any. Let me add a point there then, and I'll redraw the shape. This forehead seems off. It's supposed to be shiny and clear, but it looks very dark here. I'll split this shape in two and put a point in the middle so that I can assign a light color there. It's a bit better, but not quite right. The dark colors from the top and bottom of the shape are blending across the center of the shape, making it dark there. This will require a more extensive fix, but I'll work on that later. Now, I have the general coloring for the entire face done. It's still a little chunky in places, and there are some artifacts in it, but it provides a good base to continue working. I'm going to tidy things up by grouping together the shading of the upper part of the face into a single group. Without a nose, though, the face looks really weird, so I'm going to work on that next. I can't see the original nose and its colors with everything that I've drawn. I'll need to hide everything so that I can then trace the nose from the original image. I'll start by drawing a line down the middle of this light highlight on the nose. And now I'll build up the rest of the nose. The nostrils are a little tricky. They're blurry in the reduced palette image, so let me go look at the original version. We may want to model the dark part of the nostrils as a separate object from the upper part, because the color transition is so sudden here. There's no need to blend colors across between the upper part of the nose and this lower area here. I'm going to group together this upper nose area. And then I'll work on the nostrils. I want to correct this shadow around the nostril here. The shadow spreads out really far, but in the original shape it's really constrained. I can fix it by adding another point here with a lighter color. I'll group everything into a group called the lower nose. Let's see how everything looks now that the nose is finished. The nose looks really unnatural just sitting there. I'm going to blend in the edges of the nose so that it looks like a natural part of the face instead of just sitting on top. I'll start with the lower nose. To blend in the edges, I'm going to have to change the transparency level of the points along the edges. I need to open the info window in order to adjust the transparency level of points. I'll select the outer points of this shape, and I'll up the transparency level to 100%. This causes it to blend in with the colors of the face underneath. I'll do the same with the upper nose now. There, now the edges of the nose are blended in with the existing colors of the face. As a result, the nose looks much more integrated with the face. I want to tweak things a bit though to make the drawing seem even smoother. I used straight lines down here, but they look a little unnatural, so I'll convert them to curves instead. For these 2 points here, I want to use a tool called the Transparent Overlay Maker. I still want to keep the colors that I put there, but I want a little bit of the color underneath to show through too. What the Transparent Overlay Maker does is that it subtracts out a background color from the color above it and replaces it with transparency. Essentially, Omber tries to add as much transparency to a point as possible while trying to keep the colors looking the same as before. So even though things will mostly look the same after I subtract the colors, you will see that there's more transparency than before, so more of the color of the underlying surface will show through. This is good for shadows and other highlights because the shape blends in more nicely with the background colors. It's starting to shape up. It's now recognizable as a human face. It's not looking totally alien. The next thing I'll add will be the eyebrows. The eyebrows actually have a surprisingly large effect on how things look. I might actually even work off the original image. I'll grab the color of the eyebrow, and then I'll draw the general shape of the brow. Having the eyebrows be a solid color like that seems a little unnatural. I'm going to create a region around the eyebrows that has a gradual color transition where the eyebrow will fade out and blend in with the rest of the face. I'll keep the same color as the rest of the brow, but I'll use transparency along the edges to make the brow blend in with the skin color. And now I'll move these eyebrows I've made to the drawing. The brows look a little heavy, so I'll increase the overall transparency on them too. That's a little better, but I think it will continue to look a little unnatural until I improve the shading around the eyes later on. This forehead is really bugging me. The problem here is that there's a big light area here, but I've modeled it using these strips. These strips don't really match how the color is shaped underneath. There should be a round blob of color there, But with these strips, the dark color from the top and bottom of the strips is being blended across the shape, making the center look dark. To fix this problem, I should use a round, light-colored blob here, matching the shape of the shading in the original image. I'll actually delete these shapes in the middle and just redraw them. There, now the forehead is definitely a lot smoother now. It still seems a little odd, but that's something I can fix later with some fine-tuning. It might still be a bit early because there's still many parts of the face that can be improved, but I want to try putting some hair on. That way, I can have all the major pieces of color in before diving into more fine detailed work. The difficulty of drawing hair is that there's all these fine strands of hair. In a traditional vector tool, you would have to find some way to draw all of the hairs, which is a lot of work. Instead, Omber allows us to use a hair texture. Hair textures are actually common in 3D art. It's just an image with lots of strands of hair painted on it. They take a bit of time to make, but I'm lazy, so I'll just reuse the one from Omber's clip art. I'll go and insert the clip art called Lola Montez. Her hair uses a hair texture, so I can delete everything in the clip art except for a piece of her hair. Ideally, you should create a specific hair texture that matches the shade of hair in the original image, and that comes with highlights and other features in the right places. But to save time, I'll just reuse this one. This image texture has been curved into the shape of a hairstyle. I'm going to unroll it so that you can see what the raw texture image looks like. So this is the original image. You can see that I've drawn a lot of hair strands in it. There's a slight highlight on the top. And I've feathered it at the end, so it looks like the irregular ends of some hair. I'll now position this hair texture over where I want the hair to be. I'll try to match the hairline here. I can reshape the image just like I can adjust any other shape in Omber. The original hair is a bit dark, so it's hard to see the details of what's going on. I think there's a bit of a wave here, so I'll need to add some extra points there. The hair seems to hang down and then wrap behind the head, and there's another piece that hangs down in the back. I'll weld the bottom of the hair texture to the head outline so that it looks like it goes behind it. Since the hair tucks in behind the head, I don't need these hair ends here. I can shift the image down so that the hair ends don't appear. I want to darken the texture so that it's a closer match for her hair. I can do that by assigning a color to the hair texture. This will tint the texture, so by tinting it a gray color, the hair will become darker. To make the other half of the hair, I'll just duplicate this half, and then I'll mirror it. I need to go look at the outline of the head to see where the points are so I can tuck the hair behind the neck. And now I'll weld the end of the hair to those points I found. The hair looks a little flat. I would like to add in these highlights like in the original image. I'll take these points, and instead of tinting them gray, I'll change the tinting back to white. When I tint the hair texture with the white color, it actually just goes back to looking like the original brown color. It's not possible to lighten the texture more than what it is in the original texture image. The hair texture was originally light brown, so that's what I see when I tint the texture with white. The highlight in the original image actually looks like a white sheen. I could maybe add a semi-transparent white shape over the top of the hair to lighten it more, but I'll leave it the way it is for now. This hair is good enough for now because it allows us to see where everything will be in the final image. With all the general shapes of the final drawing in place, I can move on to working on the details. The next thing I want to work on is fixing up the cheeks and chin. The color gradients don't seem very smooth there. The topology seems a bit off and I want to rework it. So basically, the shapes I originally drew don't accurately reflect the way the colors flow in the area, so I want to draw new shapes. You can see it here as a weird artifact. The colors are blended correctly along the chin, but you still see these strange lines here. I eventually want to rewrite the internals of Omber with a new engine called the Wrinkle-Free engine, which will detect these artifacts and apply extra smoothing to them. Until I do that rewrite though, we'll have to manually smooth out these lines ourselves. I'll need to turn on outline mode to see how to reshape things. You can see how this strange line artifact here corresponds to this line in how the shapes are put together. To minimize these artifacts, you want a smaller transition of colors in your shapes. Or you can redraw your shapes so that they follow the shapes of the original colors a little more closely. What I'll do is I'll create a pinkish shape here to match this area of blush in the original image. In order to make a new shape there, I'll need to unweld the points and lines in the area so that I can pull them apart. I've made a gap for the blush area on the cheek, and I'll draw a shape there. Then, I want a new shape that wraps around the blush area. The square blush area looks odd because the original isn't square like that. Let me just adjust it a bit. It seems like the whole color transition along this shape is too abrupt. I'm going to split the shape so that I can control it more closely. There, that looks better now. There's still a few very slight line artifacts, but it's so much smoother, and it does match the overall shape and coloring of the original cheek. Next, I'll fix up the chin. There should be a big white spot here, but it isn't reflected in the way I modeled the chin. I just have these long horizontal strips. I'll specifically put in a circular region to represent the bump of the chin. So now the chin has better definition. Next, let's make the actual eye. I'll use the oval mode to create the round black pupil area. I'll take these two pupils and group them together and label them as being eyes. Then, I'll move the eyes so that they are behind the face. I'll rough in the general colors of the iris. Then, I'll make the whites of the eyeball. Now we have the basic shapes for the eyes, and I can start adding some shading to them. There's actually a small white reflection in the corner of the eye that I want to recreate. The eyes don't look too bad from far away, but they do look a little flat. I'll add a small shadow across the tops of the eyes. The shadow will be all black with some transparency. The next thing I want to do is to add some tear ducts. I'll draw the red part of the tear ducts. and then I'll remodel the eye sockets to have the proper tear ducts. I'm going to change my grouping first. It's getting annoying having separate groups for the upper and lower sections of the face, especially since the tear ducts involve both sections. I'm going to regroup everything into one big group. And now back to making some tear ducts. Now that the eyes are done, I'll move on to working on the eyelids. I want a region that goes along the top here, around the tear duct, and then along the lower edge of the eye. Now that I have the eyelid shapes in, I want to grab colors for them. To model this dark fold in the skin here, I'll just use a regular line. Let me get a color for that line. I'll go to the Shape tool and switch from Solid mode into Line mode. Then I'll just draw in the lines. I'll make the lines thicker using this width pop-up here. And then I'll adjust the shading around the eye sockets because it still seems a little off. The next thing I want to work on is getting these eyebrows to fit in a little better. I think the problem is that I haven't modeled the eyebrow ridge properly. When I switch to outline mode, I can see that I want a ridge that flows along the same line as the eyebrows. That way the shading matches where the eyebrows are. Then, I'll fix up the shading around the ridge. The face is starting to look pretty good now. The mouth is looking a little flat. I'm going to go in and add some extra shading there. I'll make a philtrum on the upper lip. I want some shadows at the corners and at the bottom of the mouth. That looks good. The nose could use a little bit more fine-tuning now. I like the way the face looks now. Let me make a neck for her. Her hair could also use some more fine-tuning. And that's it. The drawing only needs some final cleanups before I'm happy with it. And here is the final image. It was quite a bit of work, but I think the results are nice. I'm not an artist myself by any means, but I was able to recreate the subtle shading of a human face. Since this is a vector drawing, I can zoom in on the drawing with no pixel artifacts. As a vector drawing, it's also easy to reshape the drawing or rework it. This was clearly evidenced by how I was able to go in and constantly rework the drawing during the course of this video. I hope this video gives you a better sense of the power of Omber's gradient engine and gives you some ideas for things you want to draw with Omber.